Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm bringing you a game from the Blackpool Regional Championships. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, regionals have started again in the UK, and they are in the expanded format. Now, Breakpoint is legal at this tournament, so we are in the format of black and white to Breakpoint. The games are 50 minutes, best of 3, and I should say a huge thank you to Stephanie J and Blackpool Card Group for putting on this regional and allowing us to record. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have these lovely videos to show you. So as always, sit back, grab yourself a nice beverage and enjoy this game from Blackpool Expanded Regionals. Black and white to Breakpoint, 50 minutes, best of 3. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with the 7th and final round from Blackpool City Championships with two players I know we've seen before on the stream. I think we've seen in this tournament. On the left, we've got Luke Kirkham. He is going to be playing Scizor. And on the right, we have got Scott Simmons. He is going to be playing Mega Manectric. So we straight away see that Luke has a lone Jirachi start. It's not ideal. And he's having to play a Sycamore straight away, dumping a couple of energy and dumping a couple of, I think this is a Rosic there and a couple other things. A Spirit Link as well, which is not ideal. You kind of need those cards. He gets a laser, he hits a Tails, and Scott has started Manectric, which is just about what he wants to start, although it is not looking too great for him, at least the hand he's got at the moment. So Luke plays a Trainer's Mail, he hits a Professor Sycamore from that, and it looks like we've got an Ultra Ball coming down. Now, he doesn't want to get rid of a laser. That's 2 lasers gone on turn 1. Not ideal, but sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, you just have to use the cards you've got. Ultra Ball allows you to dump 2 cards and to search for any Pokemon. And Luke is stuck with a Jirachi in the active. He does not want to leave that Jirachi in the active, so he kind of has to go ahead and use Ultra Ball. And of course, in the modern format, when you're playing an EX heavy deck, you are going to be playing a Hooper EX. So when I say search for any one Pokemon, you use that one Pokemon as a Hooper, and you get to search for 2 EX Pokemon. Now we see a Scizor, we see a Keldeo, and we see a Shaymin, which of course should not surprise anybody. Scizor is Luke's main Pokemon. He's going to need one of those to attack with. Keldeo's got that rushing ability that allows you to jump in the active and hopefully get a Float Stone and retreat so you can switch your active. Oh, and he's got a Float Stone, which is awesome. And Shaymin allows you to retreat, to draw until you've got 6 cards in your hand. And Luke has got a Burbank City gym there, so that Manectric, which is poisoned from that Hypnotoxic laser, instead of taking 1 damage counter between turns, it's going to take 3, which is pretty good for Luke. It means he's going to get essentially a free 30 damage. Now, like a lot of people, we've seen Scizor. He was in round 3, we saw Luke play his brother Corey with his Mega Scizor deck. But like a lot of people, we haven't seen many Mega Scizor, so Scott's just giving it a bit of a read. Now the first attack does 20 damage and reduces damage by 20 the following turn. The second attack for 2 Metal Energy does 50 damage, but if it became active that turn, it does 110. And that, of course, is one of the reasons Luke will be playing we see a Super Rod there. We saw Luke had to dump a couple of energy straight away, so he recovers them back with the Super Rod. One of the reasons for that Keldeo, of course, is you rush in, you retreat, and then every turn Scizor has become active, so it means that Scizor basically always does 110 damage for 2 energy, which is pretty good. We then see a Scoop Up Cyclone, Luke's ace spec of choice, picks up that Shaymin, pops it back down again, and uses its setup ability to draw until he has 6 cards in hand. One of the main reasons he wanted to do that, of course, is to get himself an energy. Scizor needs 2 energy attachments, needs to attach an energy this turn and an energy next, so he needs to get that turn 1 energy attachment, and he's got it. So he rushes in with, he doesn't even need to do that. He free retreats the Jirachi, who has a Float Stone attached, and he puts the Hooper active. Why a Hooper? Because Hooper's not needed. Now, neither is Shaymin or Jirachi, but Shaymin's got 90 HP, Shaymin's got 110, Jirachi's got 90, and Hooper's got 100 and... It's either 170 or 180 HP. and that means that Hooper's more likely to be able to take a hit. Oh, and this is not a good start from Scott here. I did suggest Scott maybe, it's 170 for Hooper EX if anyone was wondering. I did suggest Scott had maybe a fairly poor starting hand, and it looks like if Luke needs one energy here to win the game. That Manectric's on 60 damage from the poison. Now Luke's getting rid of a whole bunch of stuff from Sycamore here, but it doesn't matter. Oh, there's the energy. He's got the game. He's going to be able to rush in with the Shaman, retreat into the Scizor, do 110. Now that won't actually kill the Manectric because Manectric is resistant to metal, but then it will die from the poison damage. So it's only actually doing 90 here because of resistance, puts it on 150, but then the poison kicks in between turns to put him up to a total of 180, and Manectric only has 170. So a very poor start from Scott there. Hopefully Scott's going to be able to do something and actually have a bit of a game. Now, one of the things about this Scizor deck, well, and the Manectric in fact, but I suppose Manectric more so, you don't need much to keep going, to get going. You need 1 energy on a Manectric, 20 to the active, 20 to the bench, 2 energy, 60 to the active, 120 if they have a tool attached. So you just need the basic, and obviously if you play Laser, that's nice, and the Mega's nice, and blah, blah, blah. But it's a fairly low maintenance deck. You don't need very much to get going. So to really have that little and to be KO'd on turn 2 really is just bad. And of course, it helps to highlight the almost ludicrous power of Verbank City Gym. Verbank City Gym and Hypnotoxic Laser in combination do 30 damage between turns. Laser obviously poisons your opponent's active Pokemon, and then they take 10 damage between turns. Or I should say they take poison damage between turns, because it's only 10 damage if a Verbank City Gym is not in play. As soon as you pop a Verbank City Gym in play, then poison damage becomes 30 between turns rather than 10, and as we saw there, it was only the 4 turns, the 3 turns of poison damage, 30 after Luke's turn, 30 after Scott's, 30 after Luke's, that managed to KO the Manectric. If it wasn't for the laser, Scizor's doing 90 damage. He's 2-hit KOing Manectric. But that really isn't all that until you bring in that poison damage. So it really was the lasers there that were instrumental in getting Luke that KO. Now, that resistance on Manectric is actually going to be pretty important, because Mega Manectric has 210 HP. Now, if Scizor's doing 110, then that means that 2 times 210, 220, gets the KO. 2 times 90, 180, does get the KO on the non-Mega Manectric, but not on the Mega. You'll see there Scott also plays Rough Seas, which heals 30 damage from your your lightning or water Pokemon between turns. So he's really hoping here that Luke is going to have a hard time KOing these Mega Manectrics. It almost gives him an advantage in this game, but unfortunately, he was not able to take advantage of it last turn. Scott there's just doing some mental calculations. He's playing a Hooper, and like Luke, he's thinking, do I want to get a Shaman to draw some more cards? He's trying to figure out how many cards a Shaman would draw him, and if it's worth having a 110 HP Pokemon on the bench that gives up 2 prizes. And he's basically decided, at the moment, no. Although maybe he's going to clear his hand out and get a Shaman. We don't know. Oh, and a Max Potion. So Scott really is playing a prize denial game here. Okay, so Scott's decided he wants a 2 Manectric, but he does also want the Shaman. Now, you notice that Virizion EX there. That could be incredibly useful for Scott in this game, because what that card does, if you've got a Pokemon with a grass energy attached, then Virizion EX's ability makes them immune to special conditions. Now, we saw how huge that laser was in the previous game. It denied Scott an extra turn to try and draw something with which he could set up. So if Scott is able to get a grass energy on that Manectric this turn, it means that Luke is not going to be able to poison him. I should point out you can play Hypnotoxic Laser. Luke's fully able to play that card, it just will neither poison nor put to sleep. So although you can play the card, and that's important for things like clearing your hand out so you can draw more cards of a Shaman, it's not actually going to do him any good in terms of advancing the game state. So we see a Rough Seas down there. Now Scott doesn't want to play the Rough Seas, but he knows he's probably going to play a supporter in a minute. He wants to draw more cards with the Shaman, so that's a bit of a pain. So Scott puts down the lightning energy onto the Manectric, concedes the fact there he's not getting a grass energy, so he is opening up the laser play. Now Luke actually starts with a Hooper in his deck. That's pretty cool for him. It means that he can go and get those free EX Pokemon, which is very useful. And we would expect to see, just like before, a Scizor Caldeo Shaman, unless he's got another way to draw into them. So we see he's got a Shaman in hand, so he's not going to play that Shaman. So we expect two Scizor and a Caldeo, assuming, of course, the Caldeo is not prized. Very few people nowadays play double Caldeo. Now, it's not prized, so there we go. He goes for it straight away. Now, an interesting play here is that Scott chose to put down that Rough Seas. Now, he did need an energy, so he wanted to draw more cards off of that Shaman. And now we end up with what people often refer to as the Stadium War. I.e., let's say, for argument's sake, Scott's playing 4 Rough Seas and Luke's playing 4 Verbank City Gym. That means that as long as neither player discards a Stadium at any point with an Ultra Ball or things of that nature, then Luke will have the final Stadium in play. Scott uses number 1, Luke loses number 1. Scott uses number 2, Luke uses number 2, and so on until Luke puts down number 4 and Scott has no more Stadiums to give. However, most decks don't tend to play 4 Verbank City Gym. It's a card that a lot of decks play, so you don't often play 4. Whereas a card like Rough Seas in Manectric, we would expect to see it as a 4-off. Now we see a Tails on laser there, that's pretty huge. It means he doesn't go to sleep. And we see a Shaman coming down. Luke draws a whole bunch of cards with that setup ability. Now we do have Spirit Links on both the Scizors, that's pretty useful, because it means that Luke is going to be able to Mega Revolve next turn without ending his turn. And he plays a Colress, which means he's going to get 10 cards here. Colress allows you to shuffle your hand into your deck, draw as many cards as there are total bench Pokemon. 5 for Luke, 5 for Scott means 10 cards off a Colress. And usually if you get to draw 10 cards, you're going to draw into what you want. What he really wants here is a Float Stone, although he's probably not going to want to attack this turn. Why would you want to? Now, essentially, 10 damage is done by the poison, but Rough Seas is in play. So Scott's just saying, look, I'm not going to put the 10 on there because I'm just going to lose it. Now, here's an interesting play. Tool Scrapper comes down. It allows you to... Oh, that is a horrible play from Scott. Not only does he use a Tool Scrapper to discard both of those Spirit Links, and then he Mega Revolves himself and ends his turn, but he actually gets a Jamming Net onto both of those Scizor, which means they are doing 20 less damage, and they cannot have a Spirit Link attached because they've got a Jamming Net attached, and you can only have one tool. Now, we do see he's got a Scoop Up Cyclone in hand. What he's going to probably have to do is use Scoop Up Cyclone to pick up that Scizor that doesn't have an energy attached, so that he can try and get a Spirit Link on there. But he's already used at least 2 Spirit Links. Now, he might be going for a Float Stone here, which would be a decent play. Although I kind of want the Verbank City Gym as well here. And yeah, he has gone for the Float Stone, just so we can get that Scizor in the active. Now, Scizor's going to do 90 damage, minus 20 because of the resistance on the Mega Manectric. But then, of course, that Rough Seas is in play, so it's actually going to put it down to a lowly 60 damage. So Luke really weighing his options here. Now, yeah, and as I suggested, he's just using that Scoop Up Cyclone to get rid of a Jamming Net. Now, if your opponent is using their Ace Spec that they're only allowed to play one of, just to get rid of your one of your tools, that is an incredibly good use. Oh, I say 60. Of course, it's actually doing 40. I forgot about the jamming. I said about the jamming there and then forgot about it altogether. That's fantastic. So Scizor would be doing 110. But you bring it down to 90 because, of course, the jamming net. Then you bring it down to 70 because of resistance. Then you remove 30 because of the rough seas. And this is what Scott wants to be doing in this game. He wants to be using resistance and jamming net and rough seas and max potion to basically make sure that Luke's never taken a KO. And let's be clear, ladies and gentlemen. Luke's deck is not one that goes for one-hit KOs. Unless he comes across some fairy deck that's weak to metal, he's not going for one-hit KOs here. And that really plays into Scott's favour. Oh, and he gets the Spirit Link one turn too late. Now that grass energy, as we've said, would be huge because it turns on Virizian's ability and completely gets rid of Luke's ability to play lasers, or at least do anything with the lasers. Now Luke could play something like a Hex Maniac to turn off Virizian's ability and turn on lasers, but then he's using his one supporter for the turn just to turn off one of your abilities. And as I've made the point on these videos and on my podcast PTCG Radio many times before, if your opponent is using, if they're slowing themselves down just to slow you down, using their 1A spec to get rid of your tool, using their one supporter to turn off one of your abilities, then that means that you must therefore be in a very good position yourself. I mean, do we really think that Luke wants to play his 1A spec to get rid of a jamming net? I mean, the answer, quite frankly, is of course no. Now, annoyingly, Scott had no energy in his discard pile, and looks like we're seeing a Colress for 10 here. The VS Seeker allows you to grab any supporter out of your discard, and Luke's basically gone, well, if I get a Colress out my discard, I can draw 10 cards when I shuffle my hand in. That sounds pretty good. So, Mega Manectric does 110 damage, as we've seen, and it allows you to attach 2 energy to one of your bench Pokemon. And we see there that Scott has nicely managed to get a Spirit Link on both his bench Manectric. No energy in the discard, unfortunately, which is a little bit of a shame, because what it would mean he'd be allowed to do is attach 2 of those energy. And of course, we've seen Max Potion and we've seen Rough Seas. So Scott's aim here, Scott's game plan is going to be hit for 110, because again, Scott is not going for one-hit KOs unless he happens across a lightning weak deck. Although Evil Tal is the best deck in the format and the most prevalent, at least at the top tables in this tournament. So Scott's going to have a better time hitting for weakness than Luke is. But he's not going for one-hit KOs. But his whole deal is, hey, let's do 110 damage. And then, oh, did I mention Mega Manectric's got free retreat? So I can retreat back and either just sit there and wait until I get healed with Rough Seas, or maybe even just use my Max Potion to completely heal and then reattach those energy as I attack with a second Manectric. So we do see we see a Dedenne going into the active, but he didn't get to attack because he didn't have any energy, because Luke had to use the energy on that now Mega Scizor on the bench. And he had to do that. Now, he didn't have a Spirit Link because of the brilliant use by Scott of his Tool Scrapper, and he couldn't afford the energy on Dedenne. But of course, that Dedenne is the only single-prize Pokemon on Luke's side of the field. So Luke is trying to force Scott into a 7-prize game here. Luke can KO that Dedenne as much as he likes, but it doesn't really matter because he'll still have to KO. He'll have 5 prizes left to take, but he'll have to KO 3 EX Pokemon to take those 5 prizes, and he's essentially taken 7 prizes. Now, what would be ideal here would be a Lysander, but that would then leave Scott, I think, with no cards in his deck. He's gone for a Juniper. I would be tempted, if I was Scott here, I'd be tempted with a Lysander. Now, it would be a very risky play, but not the riskiest ever. he would have essentially a 0-card hand, but he'd be taking 2 prizes, and he'd be knocking out Luke's Mega Scizor, and he's not threatening a KO next turn with his other Mega, or his Scizor. Luke's not threatening a KO with his Mega Scizor. And of course, there's no real reason to KO that Dedenne, because it essentially allows... Well, I mean, now there is a point, because he can KO and then take one of his prizes, and he knows what it's going to be. But if he KOs that Dedenne, it just means Luke can end him to 1 card later in the game rather than 2. So in Expanded, with N in the format, it really is sometimes better to not go into that 7-prize game. If Scott takes a lead, Luke is going to use the supporter card N so that you shuffle your hand into your deck, and both players, and they both draw as many cards as they have prizes remaining. If you've got 2 prizes remaining, you draw 2 cards. If you've got 1 prize remaining, you draw 1. So Scott does attack there, and there's a couple reasons to attack. Firstly, of course, he gets to take that Mega Manectric. Now, I think Scott plays a 4/4 line, but still, he gets to know he's got it next turn. And secondly, remember, Mega Manectric allows you to attach energy to one of your bench Pokemon. And we saw Scott use a Battle Compressor to put 2 energy in his discard pile so that he could then attach them to his bench Manectric, which of course is exactly what he wanted to do. As previously discussed, Luke is not getting a 1-hit KO this turn. I say a 1-hit KO, that's a silly phrase to use. It wouldn't be a 1-hit KO, that Manectric's already got 40 damage, it's already been hit. But here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Luke is going to have to do 170 damage to get a KO here. And he's just not going to do it. There's no way of him doing it. Even if he plays a Hex Maniac to turn off Virizion and plays a Laser, he can do a maximum of 150. And what's Scott going to do next turn? Maybe a Max Potion if he's got any more in his deck, but certainly he's going to want to get a Rough Seas down, retreat the Mega Manectric, and off he goes. Now, Luke doing a bit of good here. He's playing an N. Now, we know, and Luke knows, that Scott did have a Mega Manectric in his hand because he took it out of his prizes. So Luke playing that N there basically said, look, I'm ending you to 5. It's not like I'm going to really hurt you like that. But I know you've got a Mega Manectric in hand. Now you're going to have to search for it. You're going to have to draw it off your N or play an Ultra Ball or do something in order to get that Mega Manectric out of the prizes. And make no mistake about it, Scott does not want to be attacking with a Manectric here. Scott wants to be attacking with a Mega Manectric, because if he attaches with a Mega Manectric, then he can attach energy to the bench. Although, having said that, he's actually going to be in a position here where... I was just checking the damage has been calculated correctly because of resistance. He should have done 120 with the 40, putting on 160. But of course, less than that because of the whole resistance. I think it was. But it's all a moot point. Scott does not have a Max Potion, but he has an AZ. He gets to pick up one of his Pokemon and discard all cards attached to it. Well, that's fine, because now he has a Mega Manectric in hand, which he gets to evolve. Spirit Link means he doesn't end his turn. And he has to discard the 2 energy, but that's okay, because he can put that Manectric down on the bench, use Mega Manectric's attack, and then attach those 2 energy, which he just discarded by using the AZ, straight to that Manectric, and boom, Bob's your uncle, life is good. And this is what Scott wants to do. Prize denial. Now, 210 HP is very difficult to KO in one hit. Now, it can be done. Of course it can be done. But it's very difficult to do. So one of the things... And that's how Scott wins this game. He knows that Luke isn't getting a one-hit KO. He knows he's got resistance. So he gets to sit there and just have a bit of fun. Now, we do see a Lysander on the Virizion. Poisons him, it's going to do 30 damage. Now, this won't get a KO. It will do 120, the no resistance on the Virizion, plus the 30 for poison is 150. But this puts Scott on a 1-turn clock. Scott has to get that Virizion out of the active, and if he doesn't, it's going to die of poison at the end of his turn, going into Luke's, which means not only will Luke get 2 prizes, but he will get a free hit on whatever Scott has to put into the active, or what he chooses to put into the active when the Virizion dies. Now, the Virizion has a retreat cost of 1. And Scott has an AZ in the discard pile. So all he needs to do is grab an energy or a VS Seeker for an AZ, which is no longer an option, of course, because he's just played a Skylar. Oh, he's got an escape rope. That'll do quite nicely. Now, not the worst thing in the world for Luke, because what Luke's going to do here is presumably put his Hooper in the active. Now, if I were Luke, I'd actually be tempted to put the Caldeo active. It's going to take a hit for 110, and then Caldeo's going to rush in and retreat. Now, I'd be tempted to put the Caldeo active here, because Luke is expecting Scott to put down a Rough Seas, which means if Scott hits the Caldeo for 110 and then puts down a Rough Seas at some point, Luke can heal Caldeo using Rough Seas. The problem with that plan, of course, is if Luke lets Scott hit the Caldeo for 110, Scott can then go Lysander the Caldeo, boom, now I KO you, because it will be in it will be in KO range of the Manectric. Need to stop saying one hit KO when it's not a one hit KO. And as previously discussed, that Caldeo is very, very important to Luke in this game. So at this stage, we're probably thinking that Scott got a little bit unlucky in the previous game. This looks like a pretty good matchup for Scott, but he's lost game one because he just drew nothing. And we've seen it's a fairly consistent deck. We've seen it a couple times now. Oh, Scott, and we see Luke there using as a Rosic to discard the jamming net off his own Pokemon. And he's giving up the KO here. So he does 90 damage, and he's letting Luke get the letting Scott get the KO. It's gonna happen. But what Luke is doing beautifully here, that Virizion is very close to being KO'd. That Manectric is now in KO range, assuming Scott doesn't go and put down a Rough Seas or play an AZ or something along those lines. Which, of course, if I were him, I would absolutely be trying to do. So, Luke is playing this game very, very well. He's not going to get a quick win. He's not going to get big one-hit KOs. That's fine. But he's whittling down Scott's Pokemon. Now, Scott's doing the same to Luke. That Scizor in the active's got 110 damage on. That Mega Scizor on the bench has got a bit of damage on it. That Hooper EX has got a bit of damage on. Oh, and he's bringing up the Mega. Now, it's got 110, so this will get the exact KO, putting it to 220 in total. But he didn't get to heal it, and that means... Oh, it's not going to do enough, though. Because he can only do 100 with Scizor. He's going to be 20... Mega Scizor. He's going to be 20 damage short. Now, he does get an enhanced stamina to get rid of the Flash Energy onto that Manectric, and then we see a Super Rod coming down here for an energy, a Mega Scizor, and that Absol that we saw back in round 3 used to such beautiful effect. Now, Scott losing game 1 is huge. Losing game 1 is very, very bad, and we saw that he lost it through really bad luck and dead drawing rather than anything else. Why is losing game 1 so bad? Because it means if you get to game 3, you're going second. You win game 1. If there's going to be a game 3, then you have to lose game 2, in which case you are going... Excuse me, if there's going to be a game 3, you've got to win game 2, in which case, best case scenario, there is a game 3, and you're going second. And we just saw Luke draw a Getsis. There are all kinds of mean things your opponent can do if they go first, including... Now, was that jamming net? I think, yeah, the jamming net was a Rosic. We're trying to make sure it was a previous turn. I think that was what they were discussing. I believe it was, because otherwise he would have done 70, not 90 with that Scizor. So I believe he uses the Rosic to get rid of the jamming net and do 90. I'm sure there'll be a whole bunch of people, and in most of these games it seems like there's one little procedural mistake made, and I'm sure if there is a procedural mistake made, it'll be all over the comments telling me that people have made a mistake. So just look down there. But I'm pretty sure they're above board here. Two very good. I mean, both of these players have had their Worlds invite sewn up for months and months. I mean, Scott came top 4 at the ECC, the largest tournament in Europe recently. Oh, this Absol's going to do some damage, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, he's not going to get the KO on that Manectric. What he can do is use Absol to move 30 damage from that Mega Manectric to that benched Virizion. And here's the thing, not only is he going to get 2 prizes by KOing that Virizion, he is then going to turn off Virizion's ability, meaning his lasers come back into play. Oh. No. He's doing it differently. He's doing it the other way round. Now he moves 30 damage onto the Manectric so that he can do 90 and get the KO. So as weird as it seemed, and again, I said before, Luke using that Xerosic to get rid of one tool that Scott put down is not a great use of your supporter. But it just got a KO on a Mega Manectric, and that's huge. I still liked the play with the getting the KO on the Virizion to turn your lasers on. But of course, I think that Luke's thinking, there's no way he plays that many grass energy. He needs to play the electric energy for the Manectric. Manectric's second attack and Mega Manectric's only attack cost 1 colorless, 1 lightning. So he's got to be really prioritizing lightning energy. So he can't be playing that many grass energy. So I don't need to KO that Virizion. I can take the chance that Scott is going to be relying on electric energy, not draw into a grass energy. So I don't need to KO the Virizion. And I'll tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, that gamble seems to be paying off. Because if we look right now, that Manectric in the active does not have a grass energy attached. And Scott has used his energy attachment for the turn, which means lasers are back. We are, of course, at this stage assuming that Luke is going to draw into lasers. Now, here's the thing. This game is still very much in Scott's favour. Scott can get a KO on the Scizor here, go down to 1 prize remaining, at which point Luke is obviously going to try and play an end to get him to 1 card. And we see the VS Seeker in hand, so make no mistake about it. Luke is going to play an end next turn to put Scott down to a single card in hand. But if Scott were then able to draw a Lysander or a VS Seeker, oh, and we see the Spirit Link and the Mega there, then he's able to KO the Hooper, or the Shaman, or indeed the Absol, given he'll have 1 prize remaining at that stage. Luke, for his part, needs to end Scott. If he doesn't end Scott, he can just play 2 Lysanders in a row and KO Shaman / Virizion and win in 2 turns. Here's the problem. If Luke doesn't end Scott to 1 card in his hand, and Scott has a VS Seeker, then the game is over. So it's a very interesting play going on here. Luke wants the Lysander. Make no mistake about that. The energy goes on Hooper there just so he can retreat it if need be. So it's a very interesting decision for Luke. Does he go bold or does he go safe? The safe play here is end Scott to 1 and hope he doesn't draw out of it. The big play here is play a Lysander. Oh, and he's going for that. So this is a risky play. It's a bold, risky play. Plays a VS Seeker, grabs a Shaman. I would go for the Virizion, because the Virizion does more than the Shaman does in this situation. The Virizion allows Luke to... although I suppose it doesn't really matter. Luke's not going after the... Luke's not using laser here. Now, if Scott has got a VS Seeker, he's got the game, and he's got the VS Seeker, so he pulls up the Hooper, or he pulls up the Absol, or he pulls up the Shaman, and he gets the win. So like I said, that was a risky play from Luke there. I don't blame him. That, to be honest, it's probably what I would have done in that situation. He was under the kibosh, so to speak. Because even if he ends Scott to 1, what's he going to do? I mean, he's not even... well, with a laser, he's 2-hit KOing that Manectric, and he's giving Scott turn after turn to draw out of it. So you can see where Luke's coming from there. There were 2 possible plays he could have made. He chose one. It didn't work out. But there's every possibility he ends Scott to 1, and Scott draws a VS Seeker or something of that nature anyway. So what can you do? At this stage, as is customary, I should give a huge shout out and thank you to everybody at Blackpool Card Group and especially Stephanie J. This is the final game I recorded at Blackpool Regional Championships, but I think it's worth saying one more time, and I do mean this very sincerely. I'm not just saying this as a matter of course or because I feel like I should in every video. They were wonderful and accommodating on the day. They made it super easy to record. They had us in a little spare room, and then when they had to take the room back, they set aside a table at the side just for us. They had people watching my camera when I went out to grab some lunch. They were just wonderful people all day, and they made it so easy to record. And that means all of you lovely people watching it get to enjoy this game, whether you've got the commentary on or not. I'm hoping you have. It'd make me a little bit sad if you didn't. And it means I get to sit and commentate it, which, as sad as it is one of my favourite things to do. One of my favourite things, one of my biggest hobbies, one of my greatest passions, as it were, is recording these videos. So yeah, there we go. Thank you to them. They are lovely. Boom, etc. Whoop whoop, go dem. Alrighty then, so here we go. Now, here's the thing. We're in game 3 and Scott's going second. And this is very, very dodgy. Now, I haven't seen a Hex Maniac from Luke. Maybe he discarded one at some point. I'm pretty sure he hasn't played one. He could play a Hex Maniac, potentially. Meaning that Scott is not able to play any supporters. Use any abilities, like, for instance, Shaman. Or he could play a Getsis, as I started to talk about earlier. Now, we know he's got an Ultra Ball. I believe he plays Jirachi. Most people do. So we can play that Ultra Ball. Oh, and a Flow Stone for the Caldeo. He can play that Ultra Ball. And he can grab a Hooper. And then he can use Hooper to grab, one would presume, a Jirachi, a Shaman, and a Scizor. Oh, we know he plays Jirachi EX. We've seen Jirachi EX. I'm sure we have. And if he grabs Jirachi EX, you know, yeah, there it is. He's going turn 1 gets this. And why wouldn't you, ladies and gentlemen? If you get to go first, and as we've seen, Luke's deck doesn't need much. Couple of energy, and right now Scott knows what's happening. Although I did hear a gentleman's agreement at the beginning of the game that Luke wasn't going to do this. I distinctly remember Scott suggesting a gentleman's agreement that Luke wasn't going to do this. So he grabs and gets this. It's not prized. What this means is that Scott has to show his hand. And he has to shuffle all of his item cards into his deck. And for every card that Scott shuffles into his deck, Luke draws one from his. And it all depends on what Scott's hand looks like. Oh my goodness, 2 Ultra Balls, which means Scott's entire hand is 2 Flash Energy. That is not good, ladies and gentlemen. It means Scott has got to draw something. He's got to draw an Ultra Ball, a Shaman, a Jirachi EX if he plays it, a Sycamore, something. Because if Scott doesn't draw anything, this is going to go exactly like Game 1 went, and Luke is going to get an easy win. And this goes back, and both of these games go back to what I don't like about, and I've made no secret of my distaste for Expanded. Because Game 1, Laser made a huge difference. And Game 2, interesting that Luke chose to put the Scizor in the active when it could take a hit. Oh my goodness, he didn't draw anything. And that's, I mean, again, just like in Game 1, Luke needs 1 energy to hit for 90 damage. And he doesn't have it yet. Oh, he does play Hex Maniac. Luke needs a single energy to hit for 90 damage, at which point he can just do 90 damage, puts the Manectric up to 150 because of the resistance, and then Poison will kick in and will get the KO. Doesn't have it yet. And he can't play a Shaman or anything like that because he's got a full bench. I'm just trying to see what Scott drew into there. It wasn't anything good, put it that way. So, oh, he's got a VS Seeker though. And does he have something like a Sycamore in his deck? Oh, he has. He's got a Juniper in his deck. If he draws one energy off these 7 cards, it's game. No, there it is. And that's game. And that's it. And that, I mean, well done to Luke. Now, I should mention, this was a win at... Oh, and you can see there, he was never drawing out... Yeah, he just wasn't getting anything from it. He was never going to draw out of that, ladies and gentlemen. As soon as Luke played that Gets This on turn 1 of the game, it was over. Now, this was a win and in, which means Luke makes it into Top Cut, but Scott does not make it into Top Cut. And this really just helps to back up what I said about Expanded. In both games, 1 and 3, Laser made the difference. And then in game 3, we saw that turn 1 Gets This, and Gets This did not see that much play when it was actually legal when we had only the 1 format. It's really since we went to Expanded, and especially with Jirachi and Hooper in the format, it's so easy, as we saw with Luke there, to play 1 copy of it and to draw it on turn 1 of the game. Usually, as long as it's not prized, or your Hooper or Jirachi aren't prized, usually if you want it on turn 1, you can get it. So, congratulations to Luke. Clearly a good deck, and let's make no mistake about it. Luke played both games 1 and 3 exactly as he should, and won deserved victories. But spare a thought for Scott there. He had a well-made deck, which had an advantage, and we saw there in game 2, it had the advantage over Luke's deck. It was, comparing just those 2 decks, just the 2, it was the better deck. But that is absolutely pointless when it comes to turn 1 Gets This or Laser. Hey ho, these things happen. I think I have made enough of a point about this. Now, I am done with Blackpool Regionals, ladies and gentlemen, but do not worry your pretty little heads about it. I recorded 6 games at Norwich Regional Championships, and I am hoping to be recording at St Austell Regional Championships. Plenty more commentary games coming. Plus, in the next couple days, there will be a game involving... Where am I going for this? A video involving dark Pokemon and all kinds of Pokemon-y goodness. And of course, my Pokken journey will continue. I just uploaded a video about Skeptile and more videos are coming. So, you know the deal, ladies and gentlemen. Click that like button. Have you liked it yet? Have you liked it yet? Have you liked it yet? Good. Make sure you subscribe, and if you've already subscribed, get a friend too. Think of it like homework, but a lot more fun. And of course, if there is any situation in which I've been an idiot or the players have made a little mistake, that is what the comments are for. Or just telling me I'm great. Although, do be warned, if everyone just puts comments telling me I'm great, my hubris will become, well, just mean, not mean, upsetting, bad, out of order. I've been going on too long, ladies and gentlemen. I need to leave you to it. As always, have a lovely day and look after yourselves till next time. I'll be back very shortly indeed. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.